The Fractured Horizon. A Post-Apocalyptic War with Aliens. Prologue. I was born beneath a fractured sky, its pieces stitched together by satellites, defense nets, and the dim glow of orbital embers that never stopped falling. They called it peace. But to those of us who remembered or were raised by those who did, it was something else. The quiet mourning of a planet that survived itself. I have told this story more times than I can count. In the Martian academies where I teach now, my voice echoes through domes that once shuddered during the siege. Children listen wide-eyed, not because they fear, but because they cannot imagine a world as broken as the one we left behind. But I remember the last years of Earth's golden age, when light crawled across the oceans at night and our species believed it had outgrown war. I remember the rise of the Council States, the silent arms races, the whispered drone skirmishes in the upper Himalayas. I remember the first time humanity reached Titan not to study, but to settle, to divide, to colonize as it always had. And I remember the day we first heard them. Not with radios, not with telescopes, but through silence. We called them the Otham. Later, invaders, saviors, monsters, allies. We still don't know which is closest to the truth. This is not just the tale of humanity's contact with another world. It is the story of our evolution, painful, uninvited, inevitable. It is the story of how we broke, and what it took to become whole again. I do not promise objectivity. I only promise truth, what I saw, what I lost, what I still dream of in the quiet hours before Mars rise. Before we begin, you must understand where it all started. Not in the stars, but here, on Earth, with us, in the final century before the sky fell. By the mid-30th century, Earth was no longer a single world. It was a collection of floating nations, atmospheric colonies, sunshield platforms, and planetary outposts stretching from the Pacific thermosphere to the southern dunes of Mars. The Third Technocene, as we later called it, marked the final age of naive ambition. It began with the Neural Convergence Act of 2894, where quantum synaptic links allowed humans to interface directly with the Earth-wide grid. Thought-controlled machinery. Emotion-fueled currency. Identity was stored in cloud clusters orbiting Europa. And with it came a golden age of invention, one we believed we had earned. By 2907, Earth's atmosphere was 80% climate managed. Hurricanes were redirected with orbital electromagnetics. Greenland, now a sovereign megafarm, exported water-rich crops to Venus domes. Robots ran the mines of Mercury where humans no longer dared walk. But beneath the platinum-polished skin of progress, something began to splinter. The United Continental States, UCS, a fusion of what was once North and South America, competed fiercely with the Neo-Eurasian Coalition, a technocratic empire spanning old Russia to the Middle East. Then came the African Federation of Sovereignties, AFS, rising with an edge in biofusion energy, led by Nairobi, not New York. Global peace was a projection. What actually existed were data wars, AI embargoes, stealth drone battles, and subterranean sabotage networks that chewed into cities from the underworlds of Lagos, Delhi, and Berlin. No one wanted another global war. But no one stopped preparing for one either. By 2923, the moon had become a weapons vault. Earth's first orbital nation-state, Daedalus Prime, hosted 20 million citizens, and 14 different flags. Humanity's obsession with space was less about wonder, more about escape. The Great Migration began in 2932, driven by climate backlash events that made regions of Earth, such as the Sub-Amazonia and South Asia belt, unlivable. Mars colonies expanded. Terraforming on Ganymede began. The first Hyperloop cargo lanes between Venus and Earth opened by 2941. We called it progress. But in every leap we left something behind. Culture fragmented. Languages merged and then dissolved. Families were scattered across orbits and time zones. A child born on Ceres would never know the scent of real rain. And through it all, no one saw the silence creeping in. I was born in 2945, in the high-orbit city of Althera, suspended between Earth and the moon like a silver blister on the sky. My parents were memory architects. digital morticians who sculpted the last thoughts of the dying into preserved neural dreams. I grew up listening to the voices of the dead. That might explain everything that came after. They called it the soft collapse. Not because buildings fell or cities burned, but because the trust that held civilization together simply faded, like fog in a rising sun. Quiet, almost beautiful, almost painless, almost. From space, Earth looked united. From the ground, it was anything but. By 2967, national borders no longer held power. Corporate states, data syndicates, and sovereign AI governments divided the planet like pieces on a broken chessboard. What was once Europe became a patchwork of autonomous ecozones and orbital tax shelters. The UCS fought proxy battles in South Asia to protect its lunar mining interests. The African Federation of Sovereignties shut down its space elevators, citing resource theft and orbital sabotage. Each faction claimed peace. But war had changed. It was fought with blackout clouds, memory erosion viruses, and time-distorting pulses that made cities forget entire hours. I was 22 then, a cultural analyst for the Althorn Peace Council. My job was to monitor public morale across Earth colonies. I remember watching riots bloom in real time, hunger strikes in Jakarta, gravity worker suicides on Mars, water wars in New Dakar. And all the while, the world leaders sent out digital smiles and spoke of unity. They lied. After decades of migration and birth off-world, the first generation of true spaceborne citizens came of age. They didn't see Earth as home. They called it the origin. Cold, distant, cracked. In 2972, Ceres declared independence, led by a council of linguists and AI. 1 year later, the colonies on Mars voted to sever all terrestrial political ties. Earth's governments laughed. They called it symbolic. Then came the Great Withdrawal of 2975, when 32 orbital colonies shut down Earth's access to their networks. They had their own economy now, their own culture, their own gods. We should have seen what was coming. Between 2980 and 2989, we recorded 15 disappearances of long-range exploration crafts. At first, we blamed mechanical failure, then piracy, then sabotage. By 2990, the pattern was undeniable. Ships sent past Saturn stopped returning. Signals distorted. Coordinates blurred. No wreckage. No warnings. Just silence. A signal was received in 2994, carved in harmonic pulses and particle shifts. Not a language, but intention. A kind of presence. Watching. For 5 years, Earth ignored it. Then the Ophim arrived. They didn't arrive with warships. No lights in the sky. No thunder from above. Just silence. And then, something blinked. On a cold January morning in 2997, all long-range telescopes pointed toward Sector Delta Zero, just beyond Neptune's shadow. For decades, that region had been empty. So, quiet. Then it blinked. Not visually. Not optically. But through graviton echoes, ripples in the fabric of spacetime. A pattern emerged, a deliberate one. At first, scientists argued over its nature. Some said it was natural like a collapsed star echo. Others said it was a warning. I remember watching the debate on a multi-stream in the Geneva habitat. The screen showed 20 experts. None agreed, but I felt it, in my chest, a pulse. Not human, not hostile, just watching. Earth's deep space communication array received a new transmission. Not sound, not words. A visual, etched in fractal light and rotating dimensions. We had to build entirely new machines just to decode it. It showed us ourselves. Images of Earth, of humanity, of blood and fire and kindness. Then it showed a mirror. And behind that mirror, them. We called them the Ophim, a term borrowed from ancient scrolls, meaning the wheels of fire. Not because they looked like fire, but because they moved like it, impossible and beautiful and terrifying. The official meeting came 2 years later in 2999. At the edge of Jupiter's orbit. A ship unlike anything we had seen. No weapons, no demands, just an invitation. The Earth Assembly argued for months. Should we answer? Should we follow? Should we prepare for war? The corporate states wanted patents. The AI blocs demanded containment protocols. The human factions? They were afraid. They built new weapons. They whispered of conquest. Some even called it a trap. And all the while the AUFM said nothing more. I was selected as part of the first observational delegation. Not because I was powerful, but because I could see patterns in chaos. I didn't go aboard their ship, but I stood on the edge of it. I felt a presence unlike anything I've known. It was not cruel, but old. So old and curious. I remember one AUFM reaching toward me, not physically but through a hum inside my thoughts. It showed me a moment from Earth's past. A child in a war. A prayer whispered in a burning city. Then it asked, "Do you understand what survival costs?" I didn't. Not yet. But I would. At first we thought it was peace. A chance to rewrite history. But peace has a price. And Earth, as always, wasn't ready to pay it. From 2999 to 3001, Earth entered what historians now call the calm mirage. On the surface things looked stable. The Earth Assembly maintained communication with the AUFM through encoded bursts. Trade ideas were proposed, knowledge for knowledge. But beneath that fragile quiet, something darker brewed. Earth's leaders weren't just talking to the AUFM. They were talking about them. How to contain them. How to defend against them. How to exploit them. Governments began secret programs. The United Arctic Coalition launched Project Skyveil, an orbital defense grid with cloaked weapons. The Indo-Sahara Compact invested trillions into quantum displacement bombs. Even the Lunar Republic began training its youth under the slogan, "To speak with stars, learn to fire first." We hadn't even touched them, and already we were ready to strike. The AUFM's silence didn't help. They kept sending patterns, mathematical sequences, gravity echoes, glimpses of extinct star systems. We didn't understand what they wanted, or if they wanted anything at all. One day in late 3000, a research vessel from Mars disappeared. It was last seen near the AUFM's observation ring near Saturn. Official word was gravitational failure. But my informant, a physicist named Duro Sal, had intercepted fragments of the last transmission. Something is scanning us. Not with light. With memory. After that, fear became law. In early 3001, a stealth drone from Earth, sent by rogue scientists in the Atlantic conglomerate, attempted to sample part of the AUFM's vessel. A tiny piece of it. Microscopic. The reaction was instant. The AUFM didn't attack. They disappeared. Not vanished, but folded into dimensions we couldn't trace. And when they returned, they weren't curious anymore. 3 weeks later, an AUFM signal punctured every human satellite orbiting Jupiter's moon Europa. It wasn't a message. It was a statement. All systems failed. The airlocks on the Europa Research Hub opened. 73 scientists died in minutes. Officially, it was called a malfunction. Unofficially, it was retaliation. I was in Geneva when it happened. I watched leaders scramble, blaming rogue nations, false flags, sabotage. No one admitted the truth. We had provoked something we didn't understand. In the final months of 3001, the Earth Assembly broke. Factions pulled out. Militaries moved into space. Trust vanished. The AUFM sent one last signal. Just one phrase. "You are not alone. And you are not ready." That was the last time we heard from them before the war. But the stars had already begun to burn. The line was never crossed. It was shattered. By early 3002, trust between nations dissolved faster than ice in the equatorial sun. The Earth Assembly, once the proud central voice of global cooperation, broke into fragments. Each region went dark, cutting off from global systems, rewriting their own protocols, issuing space lockdown orders. The Atlantic conglomerate accused the Lunar Republic of harboring alien sympathizers. The United Arctic Coalition deployed AI-piloted sky javelins to patrol orbit. The Indo-Sahara Compact launched the Helix Shield, a continent-wide EMP field. I remember watching the assembly dissolve live on the holostream. Delegate after delegate walked out. No one looked back. No one said goodbye. Humanity had turned inward. and it was about to look up with blood in its eyes. It came in mid-3002, a low pulse, like a heartbeat, echoing from the dark quadrant near Neptune, where the AUDIOBOOK had last been seen. Only this time it wasn't math. It wasn't philosophy. It was an image, a burned earth, silent skies, and one word, etched into the dust with light: choice. Panic spread faster than the signal itself. Was it a warning? A prophecy? Or an ultimatum? No one agreed, so everyone prepared for war. On March 17, 3003, the first shot wasn't even aimed at the AUDIOBOOK. It was launched from a deep space vessel called the Zephyr, under the authority of the Indo-Sahara Compact. Target: a rogue Martian relay satellite believed to have been compromised by alien influence. The missile misfired. Instead of disabling the relay, it detonated near Callisto Outpost, an independent science station. 98 people died. The AUDIOBOOK didn't respond immediately. They waited. Watched. Then, 4 days later, a single AUDIOBOOK vessel emerged near Saturn. It hovered, silently. And then, with a ripple of anti-light, it disabled the entire orbital grid over Earth's southern hemisphere. No one was killed. But every eye on Earth looked up that night and saw only darkness. After that, everything moved fast. In just 3 months, every major power had launched military craft into orbit. Drones patrolled the Kuiper Belt. New AI generals were activated. Spaceports were militarized. Then, on July 1, 3003, a joint Earth command made the declaration: for the security of human sovereignty and the protection of interstellar peace, the AUDIOBOOK are hereby recognized as a hostile threat. And just like that, the stars became a battlefield. I remember the night before it all broke open. I stood on the roof of the Geneva Archives. The sky was unusually clear. I looked for constellations my grandfather once taught me: Orion, Lyra, and that ancient one, Cassiopeia. But they were gone, drowned in satellites, ships, and blinking weapons. It was the last night I ever saw the stars without fear. The first month of the AUDIOBOOK conflict. The first real battle did not take place over Earth, but in the outer belt, near a mining colony called Icarus 9. The AUDIOBOOK didn't arrive with fleets. They arrived with shadows. No hulls, no thrusters, just shifting forms, transparent, angular, cold. Their vessels didn't emit heat. They bent light around them. Icarus 9 lost contact within 12 minutes. No bodies were ever found. Only static. And still, humanity advanced. Earth's governments, fractured but desperate, united under a military pact called the Global Defense Accord, GDA. The GDA was not a political body. It was a machine, part algorithm, part command chain. It merged orbital weaponry, ground forces, AI tactics, and space fleets. At its center sat Commander Inoa, Earth's first unified warlord. I remember the broadcast when she took command. We do not fight for conquest. We fight for memory, for tomorrow, for the right to exist. Millions cheered, but some whispered, she sounds more often than human. On April 2, 3004, Earth launched Operation Skyveil. 27 manned ships, 400 drones, 2 artificial intelligence warfare nodes. Their mission: intercept and disable the AUDIOBOOK vessels near Ganymede. Within 6 hours, the operation turned into a massacre. The AUDIOBOOK didn't return fire. They simply rewrote Earth's targeting systems in real time. Ships turned on themselves. Drones looped endlessly. Pilots screamed before their own cannons opened fire. Only 3 ships made it back. Commander Inoa watched the feat in silence. She didn't cry. Following Skyveil, Earth deployed its darkest creation: the neuronet pulse, a directed signal that targeted neural pathways through magnetic fluctuations. It was meant to disrupt alien cognitive signals. Instead, it backfired. On June 9, 3004, the neuronet pulse sent out a faulty wave that reached Earth orbit. 10,000 Earth soldiers stationed on the Zeus Wall defense line suffered neural collapse. Most died instantly. Others survived with irreversible brain damage. In our effort to silence the AUDIOBOOK, we silenced our own. For nearly a year, Earth fought in orbit on moons in the dark corridors of space stations. But in late 3004 they came to us. The first ground strike hit New Brasilia, a megacity of 80 million. Often vessels didn't land. They hovered, shifted, and released veil particles, invisible, weightless spores that infected data, minds, and memories. Entire districts fell into confusion. Families forgot who they were. Armies fired blindly into their own cities. The veil didn't kill. It unmade. I was there. I watched as my uncle, a physicist, stared at a mirror and whispered, "Who is that?" It took months to rebuild what was lost. But some things didn't come back. From 3006 to 3010 the war changed. Not in intensity but in shape. Gone were the large-scale operations. Gone were the dreams of quick victory. Both Earth and the AUDIOBOOK suffered devastating losses. But neither side yielded. The war became a slow burn. Each side too wounded to win, too proud to retreat. We called it the still fire period. I lived through those years. I remember the broadcasts turning less frequent, the flags growing faded, the people quieter. In late 3006, Earth's most advanced orbital research hub, Luna 5, vanished. No explosions. No warnings. It simply blinked out of the solar grid. One day there were families aboard. Children playing in artificial gardens. Scientists running long-term gravity experiments. Then, nothing. Theories spread fast. Some said the AUDIOBOOK erased it. Others believed Luna 5 joined the enemy. The darkest theory? That Earth shut it down to prevent secrets from leaking. No one ever found it. But sometimes, on quiet nights, signals still echo from that side of the moon. Oh, broken. Like lullabies sung by static. While Earth's major cities fortified, something else was growing. Underground networks, hidden societies led by survivors, thinkers, defected scientists, and even former soldiers. The most notable group was the Iron Song, led by a cybernetic veteran named Kale Arun. They weren't loyal to the GDA or Earth's Council. They believed the war was misunderstood, that the AUDIOBOOK were not invaders but echoes of something older. They collected debris. They translated alien signals. They kept records when others burned them. Many dismissed Iron Song as traitors. But later, they became the bridge. In 3010 something happened that changed everything. An AUDIOBOOK vessel didn't attack. It landed. Not in a major city. Not in a battlefield. It touched down in the dead fields of old Kenya, in a village once swallowed by sand and silence. From it emerged something human-like. Tall, silver-veined skin. No mouth. No eyes. But it spoke through thought. And it said just one word. Peace. The world held its breath. Earth did not fire. Instead, they sent archivist Elian Vo, my old professor, to record the exchange. What followed was the first peace council between species in recorded history. It was not televised. Only those inside knew what was said. But Elian returned and wrote just one sentence in his personal logs. "We have feared ghosts, but they bleed too." By the end of 3010, the Veil Agreement was signed. Earth would cease all neuronet experimentation. The AUDIOBOOK would pull back from all inhabited systems. A neutral zone was established around Jupiter's moons. A shared observatory would be constructed on Europa, manned by both sides. Not all agreed. Some felt it was weakness. Others wept in relief. I watched as Commander Inoa stood beside the AUDIOBOOK emissary, neither smiling nor frowning. Just existing. Together. And maybe that was enough. The Veil Agreement did not end the war. It froze it. The world didn't erupt into celebration. It held its breath, watching, waiting, unsure if this was calm or just the eye of a storm. I remember those years as strangely quiet. Not peaceful, quiet. Like walking through a house where someone once screamed. Children born during the war came of age. They had no memories of blue skies, only filtered domes and military drills. They asked questions we feared. Why did the sky burn? What's an alien and why did they hate us? If the war is over, why do we still carry guns? In classrooms built from recycled ship hulls, we tried to explain without breaking them. But they were already fractured, born into aftermath. One student, barely 16, told me, We didn't survive war. We were shaped by it. I had no answer for him. In 2012, a wrecked satellite was retrieved from low orbit. Inside, damaged files, encrypted logs, and something unexpected, a folder labeled Lyra. It held hundreds of messages, love letters between a GDA pilot and an OFM exile. Translated, remastered, and broadcast as an art piece by the Europa Observatory, they told a forbidden love story. Two enemies, meeting in the void, sharing music, language, fear, and longing. Some praised the story. Others tried to shut it down. But it changed how many saw the war. We realized, not all aliens were soldiers. Not all humans were heroes. Some were just people, trying to find love in the dark. From 3013 to 3015, Earth built 7 memorial cities, each on a different continent, designed not as museums but living stories. No military parades. No victory banners. Each one told different truths. A one city honored the lost orbital colonies. A one preserved the songs sung during evacuations. A one recorded the names of every soldier who defected, on both sides. I visited the African memorial in what was once Ghana. It had a room where holograms replayed final video calls from the lost. I stood there for hours listening. I still remember a voice, soft, female, whispering, "If someone finds this, tell my son I loved the stars more than I feared the end." The leader of Iron Song vanished in 3015. Some say he died. Others claim he left Earth aboard an unregistered OFM vessel. No one knows the truth. But before he disappeared, he left behind one message, embedded in a frequency only the Europa scientists could hear. History is not what happened. It's what we dare to remember. I still hear those words in my dreams. And I wonder, what have we dared to forget? After years of radio silence, both sides, human and OFM, approached the same conclusion. War had no winner. Only ruins with names. The talks began quietly. No media. No announcements. Just whispered transmissions relayed between Jupiter's moon bases and an abandoned OFM outpost orbiting Neptune. I remember the first confirmed signal. It said only, requesting dialogue. No arms. No deceit. Only need. It was signed by an OFM envoy called Sol-Ka-Rez, one we had thought long dead. Earth's delegation came fractured. The Global Democratic Alliance sent 3 envoys, a war-scarred general, a sociologist, and a 22-year-old AI ethicist born in orbit. The Pacific Federation, though weakened, insisted on sending its own rep, Kaori Mitsun, a former pilot-turned-peace negotiator. Even Iron Song, now mostly disbanded, sent a civilian, Nail Arun, Kale Arun's eldest son, carrying his father's encrypted journals. The OFM brought 5 beings unlike any we had seen. One shimmered in color when speaking truth, another spoke through frequencies only machines could interpret. I watched the recordings trembling, because in that moment I knew. We were not negotiating with monsters. We were meeting reflections. Darker, older, wiser, but reflections still. The final accord was signed in 3018, in a vessel hovering above Earth and Saturn's rings simultaneously, via quantum relay. They called it the Concord of Fractured Stars. It had 4 primary accords. 1. Non-aggression pact. Neither side could initiate interstellar military action without independent oversight from a neutral species, whom we hadn't even met yet. 2. Technology exchange. The OFM would share selective propulsion and environmental technologies. Earth would offer its neural interfaces and energy distribution algorithms. 3. Refuge and recovery. A designated belt of terraformed moons would act as shared sanctuaries for displaced species. 4. Memory archives. Both Earth and OFM would maintain truth archives with AI-curated, citizen-accessible history logs of the war. Not everyone agreed. Some called it a betrayal. Some said we had bowed to our enemies. But most of us, we exhaled. We had survived long enough to sign something other than death. Following the treaty, Earth's political structure began to reshape. The United Terran Assembly replaced the fractured councils, including seats for orbital colonies and even for AI representatives. Borders softened, trade routes reopened, and resource wars lost meaning as alien-enhanced atmospheric converters made deserts bloom again. Former enemies, like the North Atlantic Union and Neo-Siberia, cooperated on rebuilding the Lunar Learning Network for war orphans. One unexpected outcome? The rise of a philosophical movement called echoists, those who believed war had broken our timeline and that peace was not just survival but a correction. I didn't join them, but I understood them. In 3020, on Europa's frost-glass surface, a school opened. Half its students were human. Half were often born. They shared a language built from 3 systems: sound, light, and thought. The first lesson they learned? War teaches only what peace must unlearn. I taught a guest lecture once. I showed them an ancient Earth photograph, 2 children holding hands looking up at the stars. They asked me, were they afraid of what was up there? I paused and said, yes, but they looked anyway. The dust didn't settle immediately. It never does. But in the decades that followed the Concorde, Earth began to change, slowly and not always smoothly. Borders didn't disappear overnight, but they faded. Maps weren't redrawn, they were reimagined. The United Terran Assembly, once a temporary committee of wartime necessity, transformed into the First Planetary Congress. Each former nation became a region, each with elected stewards who served not only their people but the planet. Some called it idealism. Others called it the only way forward. Even I, old and cynical, couldn't deny it. There was less shouting, more listening. The children born after the treaty, those we called the Concorde generation, grew up without fire drills or bunker simulations. Instead, they learned about alien languages, shared rituals, and post-conflict ethics. Education was universal now. It began not with, "This is your country," but, "This is your planet. This is your species. Here's who we almost became. Here's who we must choose to be." Schools floated in low orbit, danced on oceans, and glowed under Martian domes. They used AI mentors paired with human guides. Some classes were led by OFM teachers, calm, multisensory beings who taught empathy by having students translate emotional memory into sound. By 3030, we had our first interstellar port in the Kuiper Belt. At first, only OFM vessels docked. Later, other species came, ones we had only heard rumors of during the war. We traded data for organic alloys. We traded music for graviton tech. Even now, I remember watching a barter between a Terran farmer and a bioluminescent trader from the far galaxies. He offered sun-grown algae in exchange for a crystal that sings back the voice of anyone who holds it. The economy no longer revolved around oil, currency, or silicon. It ran on ideas, memories, and trust. Religions didn't vanish. Some grew stronger. Others merged. A new spiritual movement formed, the Order of the Horizon Flame. Not a religion really, more of a calling. They believed the war was a divine lesson and peace, a sacred responsibility. I met one once, an OFM and a human co-priest. They blessed a refugee camp with a single sentence, spoken in 5 languages. "May your pain not become prophecy." I wept. Not all was smooth. There were still pockets of resistance, groups who clung to the old ways, who thought the treaties were a surrender. They called themselves the purists, humans who refused alien integration. A few bombed alien diplomatic stations in 3027. Another group sabotaged a peace school in orbit in 3031. But they never grew large. Why? Because their children didn't stay. They left. To learn. To build. To imagine. Unity wasn't immediate. It was not fireworks and handshakes. It was boring committees, endless compromises, shared grief, and the slow realization that survival alone wasn't enough. We needed meaning. And meaning came in art, in architecture, in rebuilding not just our cities, but our collective memory. In 3049, the last physical border, what was once the reinforced divide between the old United States and its former southern wall, was taken down. A child from New Nairobi and a boy from Alpha Shanghai planted a shared garden on that spot. Their names were unknown to the media, but we who watched, we knew what it meant. I was there. I stood on a hill above the ceremony and felt something I hadn't in a century. Hope. War doesn't end with treaties. It echoes, in buildings, in bodies, in dreams. Even decades later, veterans like Eshan Moretti couldn't sleep. He walked with a limp not from injury but from memory. He said once, "I didn't lose my leg, I lost my reason for running." I visited him in 3052 at the Terran Memory Clinic in Oslo Dome. He painted the war every day, alien ships, burning moons, names he couldn't forget. Then he'd set them on fire in a digital kiln, watching them dissolve in synthetic flame. It was therapy. It was survival. We called them the Ash Generation. Born right after the Concorde, raised by scarred parents in haunted silence. These children asked questions no textbooks could answer. Did my mom kill aliens? Was I born because someone else died? Can peace be trusted? In response, Earth built the memory gardens, interactive installations across continents and colonies. Each garden told a different story. A hologram of the burning sky above Paris. The final letter of a miner in Ceres, written in zero-gravity ink. A chamber where visitors could feel recorded alien grief, raw, immersive, in every color and vibration. One child whispered after visiting, "Now I understand why my father cries when it rains." A movement emerged, the Witness Project. It wasn't just historians. It was poets, engineers, sculptors, and AI programmers who built emotion maps of war. They cataloged loss not by numbers but by stories. In year 3056, a play called Ashes Beyond the Orbit debuted in Mars City Dome. It was performed by actors from 6 species. There were no lines, just gestures, heartbeats, and translated sorrow. It toured for years, reaching billions. Even I, weary as I was, sat in the last row and wept. The AFM suffered too. Though we stopped firing, they carried their own ghosts, fractured thought forms, broken hive harmonies. In 3060, an AFM empath named Rekshala began the joint mourning rituals. They brought together Terrans and aliens once a year, in silence, to share psychic imprints of pain. I attended one on Europa. We held hands with beings who looked nothing like us and shared the same ache. There were no words, just resonance. In academic halls and quiet coffee houses, in refugee towns and glass skyscrapers, the same question kept echoing. Could it happen again? The United Terran Assembly passed dozens of safeguard protocols. Interstellar ethics councils were formed. Even AI were programmed to detect rising conflict tones in diplomacy. But fear has its own orbit. Some believed another war was inevitable. Others believed the first one had taught us enough. I walked a middle path, hoping we'd remember long enough not to forget. In 3069, Colonel Yeva passed away. Hero of the Southern Martian Front. The one who held the line in the Battle of Red Arc. Her funeral wasn't just military. It was global. Alien dignitaries came. She was buried under twin flags, Earth's and the Concorde Standard. Her last words, preserved in her AI companion. If we must build a future from ashes, let it be one where every child can name the stars and never fear them. By the dawn of the 32nd century, Earth had changed. Not in the loud, sudden ways of war, but like mountains reshaped by wind, slow, persistent, irreversible. Skylines shimmered with organic metal hybrids. Cities breathed. Gravity wasn't absolute. There were neighborhoods with tailored physics, imported from Ophimian science. Children floated to school. They studied in 6 languages by age 6, 3 human, 3 non-human. History was taught with caution, reverence, and voices from every side. I remember visiting the rebuilt Nairobi Arcology in 3107. A young girl asked me, "Were the aliens always this kind?" I told her, "They were always people." She nodded. That was enough. The United Concorde had grown beyond its war-born purpose. Now it wasn't just an alliance, it was a framework, a way to disagree without destruction. Earth had 4 major representatives, none from military divisions, all from fields once undervalued: environmental empathy, xenolinguistics, trauma reconciliation, artificial ethics. Even the AFM had evolved. They adopted names now. One of their youngest, who chose the name Silence Walker, served as Earth's ambassador. They smiled with light instead of lips. And when they said, "We remember," the whole chamber stilled. I'm older now. My days are slow. I've been called historian, survivor, traitor, prophet. I accept none. I was a child when the earth split. I was an adult when the sky bled. Now I am something else, a voice that stayed long enough to be heard. I live on Titan, under a dome of warm light. My lungs are artificial now, carbon silk blend, often grown. My memories, however, are still human. Painfully so. Each year I teach. I tell the stories. Not the sanitized ones. Not the numbers. I speak of faces, hands, final breaths. Of love that couldn't survive war. And love that was born because of it. In 3122, the first child of mixed Terranophim descent was born. Her name, Aya, meaning miracle in both our languages. She has eyes that see in heat spectrums. A voice that resonates in colors. A mind free from the prejudices we bled trying to escape. She will never know the sound of warplanes. She will never count borders on a map. She will learn that diplomacy is not an art but a discipline. And peace, not an outcome but a practice. This is my last chronicle. My last voice recording my final truth. If you're listening, know this. The fractured horizon healed not because we forgot where we broke, but because we remembered long enough to rebuild differently. The stars are no longer silent. Neither are we. History doesn't end. It echoes, if we choose to listen. So listen, please.